Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, Part 12. After ordering Arjuna to perform his duty in the preceding verse, now Sri Krishna Paramatma describes how he should remain even-minded while performing actions. Yogastha kuru karmani sangatyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. O Dhananjaya, the conqueror of wealth you are, perform actions and your duties being fixed in yoga, renouncing attachment, having become even-minded in success and failure. Equanimity, that is equilibrium, is called yoga. You can become indifferent only if you have no attachment for actions, their fruits, place, time, incidents, circumstances, bodies, and minds, which belong to matter, because without being indifferent to the actions, they cannot lead you to salvation. Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva. Renunciation of attachment will result in evenness of mind. A man should be even-minded in favorable and unfavorable circumstances, honor and dishonor, praise and reproach. A follower of the discipline of disinterested action should be so even-minded while performing actions that he should not bother for their accomplishment or non-accomplishment, for getting its fruit or not, for getting salvation or not. He should remain devoted to his duty. If an aspirant has not realized detachment and equanimity, he should aim at evenness of mind. By having this sort of approach, striver will attain equanimity finally, which will result in God realization or self-realization. Yogastha kuru karmani. Sri Krishna Paramatma says that the essence of true yoga lies in even-mindedness, in the midst of success as well as failure. The person who ever keeps the mind in the poised state is called the steadfast in yoga. The sameness of mind should remain intact from the beginning of an action to its end. It should not be a temporary phase, otherwise the propensities of attraction and repulsion will go on springing up. We should never allow such propensities to develop. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga is nothing but equanimity. Equanimity is the embodiment of Lord Himself. Further, in the 19th verse of the 5th chapter, Sri Krishna Paramatma will say, "Those whose mind is established in equanimity have conquered the mortal plane, because Brahma, the Absolute, is flawless and equanimous. Hence, they are established in the eternal." Here, yoga has been defined as equanimity, while in the 23rd verse of the 6th chapter, it will be defined as a state which is free from the contact of pain. Actually, both the definitions are the same. When a man suffers from a ringworm or itching eczema, he gets pleasure by scratching it. The pleasure of itching is followed by the painful sensation of burning. Being the result of a disease, both these sensations are really painful. Similarly, the pleasure and pain received out of the attachment to the world are equally painful. Therefore, yoga can either be defined as a state free from the contact of pain, free from pleasure and pain, or equanimity in pleasure and pain. Both are the same. It means that all the actions performed by physical, subtle, and causal bodies should render service to the world without having any selfish motive. This alone will lead to equanimity. Something noteworthy about intellect and equanimity. Intellect is of two kinds, indeterminate and determinate. The intellect of those whose aim is to enjoy worldly pleasures and prosperity is indeterminate, while the intellect of those whose aim is equanimity and salvation is determinate. Indeterminate intellects are endlessly diverse, while the determinate one is single. Those whose intellects are endlessly diverse are themselves undecided and are worldly. But those whose intellect is single have rightly resolved, and they are strivers. Equanimity is of two kinds, of the mind and of the self. To remain even in favorable or unfavorable circumstances without having any attachment or aversion is equanimity of the mind, while equanimity of the self is union with God or spiritual illumination. There is a distinction between the worldly people and the strivers. The goal of the worldly people is to enjoy pleasure and prosperity, and their intellects are not determinate but are scattered in many directions and are endlessly diverse. On the other hand, the strivers' intellects are determinate, and the strivers in their practical life maintain equanimity in success and failure, profit and loss, and favorable and unfavorable circumstances, without having attachment and aversion. Such strivers conquer the mortal plane and are established in the eternal. Now, in the next verse, Sri Krishna Paramatma explains the superiority of equanimity, which has been described from the 39th verse to the 48th verse, to a motivated action, that is, action with a selfish motive. Dure nahyavaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya buddhau sharanam anvichya kripanapalahetavaha. O Dhananjaya, action with a selfish motive is far inferior to that performed with equanimity of mind. Seek refuge in this evenness of mind, for wretched are those who crave for fruit of action. Action with a selfish motive is far inferior to that performed with equanimity of mind. Actions have a beginning and an end, and the connection with their fruits is also temporary. We get associated and disassociated with them. But yoga in equanimity is eternal. It never deserts us. It suffers no change. Therefore, selfish action is much inferior to equanimity. Actions without equanimity mislead to pain as well as the cycle of birth and death, because they have no power to lead to salvation. Equanimity is an art to naturalize actions. If there is no equanimity, one will develop one's egoism and attachment to the body. This sort of egoism and attachment is beastly. In the Bhagavata, sage Sukadeva says to King Parikshit, O king, renounce this beastly nature which is causing fear of death in you. Durena. As light is the contrary of darkness, an action performed with equanimity of mind is contrary to the action performed with a selfish motive. Because an action performed with equanimity leads to God realization, while motivated actions mislead to the wheel of birth and death. Seek refuge in this evenness of mind. Remain established in this evenness of mind, which will enable you to realize yourself. It is very wretched to crave for fruit of action. To accept one's affinity for actions, fruits of actions and bodies and so on means to crave for fruit of action. Therefore, Sri Krishna Paramatma in the 47th verse exhorts Arjuna not to have the fruit of action as his object. The eternal substance is different from perishable actions and the fruits of actions. What can be more ignoble than this, that the eternal substance should be subservient to the perishable fruit of action? In the next verse, Sri Krishna Paramatma explains the result of equanimity of mind. Buddhi yukto jaghatiha ube sukrita dushkrite tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karmasu kaushalam. Endowed with equanimity, one frees oneself in this life from good, that is virtue, and evil, that is vice, alike. Therefore, devote yourself to this yoga of equanimity. Skill in action lies in the practice of this yoga. The person endowed with equanimity becomes free from virtues and vices like omnipresent God. In the state of equanimity, a man while living in the world detaches himself from the world and remains untouched by virtues and sins as a lotus leaf by water. The man himself is sentient and is free from virtue and sin, but by identifying himself with the unreal body, sins and virtues accrue. If he does not identify himself with the unreal, he will remain untouched by virtues and sins, just like ether. Therefore, devote yourself to the yoga of equanimity. Remain established continuously in equanimity. You can't attain that equanimity so long as you have attachment and aversion. You are the knower of pleasure and pain. It means that you are different from them and you are the onlooker who remains equanimous. So realize that equanimity. Skill in yoga action lies in the practice of this yoga. Equanimity in success and failure is skill in actions. In this verse, Sri Krishna Paramatma has not defined yoga, but he has explained the importance of yoga. If we interpret it as skill in actions is yoga, it means that the action of a thief carried out skillfully will also be called yoga. Therefore, the is interpretation does not seem proper. Other people may define yoga as skill in actions approved by the scriptures. But by doing so, the people will be bound by the fruits of actions and will not be able to attain equanimity. Therefore, it is proper to interpret equanimity in actions as skill or wisdom. The reason is that he who remains even-minded while performing actions is not bound by actions and their fruits. Secondly, in this first part of this verse as well as in the previous two verses, there is a reference of yoga in a sense of equanimity rather than skill. So, this interpretation seems to be reasonable.